information is incredibly important. We think that people have illnesses and conditions that cannabinoids can be very effective for, and in fact they're incredibly safe, especially when you compare them to some pain-relieving medications and others like opioids, where people are obviously getting very ill and worse from taking those. So we like to do these talks. We like to invite people to take the materials that we have in the back of the room. We also have, Kristen has a sign-in sheet if you're interested in getting a monthly newsletter. I will say, if you sign it, you will get the monthly newsletter. And you can take your name off it. You can unsubscribe at any time. But there's a lot of great information in it, including not only...
That's over the internet?
It comes in your email.
Okay.
Yep. There's information about events. There's information about products, about science. So they really are very, very, very good. So I'm going to start to jump in and just walk through some of the major pieces at first of information about both conditions that are helped by cannabinoids. And when I say cannabinoids, I'm referring to a spectrum of chemical compounds that are generally found in either cannabis or hemp. So hemp is the plant that if you have plant material that's made into a product, it is not euphoric, it cannot make you high. The receptors don't exist in your brain for doing that. And that's where CBD products are generally derived from. You can also have products from cannabis that are mixed with CBD. And so we'll get into that in a little while on how the cannabinoids are broken down. But there's a spread of them, not just those two, not just THC and CBD. So this is actually a relatively small list of conditions that may be affected in a positive way by taking cannabinoids. And there's both, when we look at this information, there's clinical information about these conditions. There may be preclinical, which means basically mice or rats. There's in vitro information, which is test tube as well. And then there's why we have medical marijuana laws in the States, which is anecdotal. Lots of people try it, have been trying it for decades. Other people would say for centuries. This plant has been around for thousands of years as a medicinal plant. It was in the US pharmacopoeia for close to 100 years. And medical providers used it, pharmacists used it pretty regularly for pain relief and of all different ilks. And they also used it, there were tinctures that were made for having people withdraw from opioid addiction. And that's all documented. So we have used it quite frequently in our history. And one of the reasons that we have state laws, even though on the federal side it's illegal, Schedule I, a controlled substance, because of states' rights, we have state programs that have said basically that the concern of the state is higher than the interest of the federal government, and that's how we have these programs. So it still is we're still limited somewhat by the illegality on the federal level. For instance, one of the reasons I do these talks is because we can't advertise because it's Schedule I. So we have many, many people who are ill with various conditions and diseases, and we have a relatively safe plant that can help you, but we can't tell you about it. And so one of the reasons I go out and other people go out and do these talks is so that they can get information. We're going to jump in now to a little bit of the science about, we're not going to jump that far yet. I just want to let people know that we have currently these are the dispensaries that are opened in the state. And so I work for one company. There's a couple of other companies that have dispensaries. So we have Burlington, South Burlington, Montpelier, Middlebury, Brandon, Bennington, and Brattleboro. when there's close to somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 patients on the state's medical marijuana program, where they have a formula for when it reaches a certain amount, they'll open up another dispensary. And so that's how the state decides. And then they decide also where it should go. And they take applications and they review them, and they have criteria for how they choose. And generally speaking, one of the criteria is that who's ever operating the dispensary has to have ties to our state. So it doesn't just become like a bunch of rich people from another place coming in and setting up dispensaries.
So you're probably going to talk about this, and I'm probably jumping. So people have to go to the dispensary to get the medicine, marijuana, or can it be delivered to them?
Both. You can have both. Either or both, yeah. So I'll get to that in more detail, but we do, every single dispensary in the state of Vermont right now has a delivery program. But that's a good question. So why is there symptom relief? This is something that, especially in modern science, we hear a lot about is, and especially from the established medical society, because the endocannabinoid system is not, as far as we know, taught in very many medical schools today. There's a big conference, national conference called Cannabis, and last year it was at Harvard, and last year at Cannabis there was one speaker who said that he only knew of one medical school that teaches the endocannabinoid system. So we have a lot of doctors out in the world who have never heard of the system on which symptom relief rests. And it makes a lot of sense that then they're skeptical about, this drug that is still Schedule I, still illegal on the federal level, and they've never heard about it in supposedly this incredibly comprehensive medical education. I would say one of the reasons is because it's been so vilified in 1970 when they decided to make it illegal under the Controlled Substance Act. That was part of, there were decades before that was involved in propaganda specifically against the plant. And then when you make something federally illegal, it's really hard to run a campaign against that, of information. So the endocannabinoid system, which was discovered in the late 1980s by two different sets of scientists, one in the United States, one in Israel, and they found this system that's inside all mammals. It's been there for a very, very, very long time. And its primary responsibility is what we call homeostasis, or balanced health. And it operates in every organ on a cellular, and some would say sometimes subcellular basis. And if you can imagine, so I like this diagram a lot, this image a lot, because it sort of shows that it's everywhere. But it's a physiological and communication system. So it's constantly sort of like, if you can imagine it, it's beaming information back and forth. Everybody's kind of chatting with each other. Is everything okay? Everybody feel good? Anything happening? Oops, you got cut. Bunch of information runs to where the cut is. And the idea is it sends messages, there's inflammation, then there's a signal to the brain to stop thinking about like how much it hurts. There's all these other things that are pulling it back into health or some variety of health. And so that's our endogenous system. We have that already. That's what's going on all the time. And there's lots of reasons why it doesn't work perfectly. And, there's a bunch of literature written about, we have an incredibly toxic environment that we live in, both physically and emotionally. I mean, there's so much stress today in the world that, children have anxiety issues. And so all of these create a system that can and probably does affect our what we call cannabinoid or endocannabinoid tone. So people are in less good health, and they are, sometimes there's supplements that people are taking to help that, but we found that a lot of times cannabinoids can help people tremendously. And it can help with specific symptom relief that we've seen over and over again, whether it's chronic pain, nausea, vomiting, muscle spasticity, and memory, all these different things that show up in the endocannabinoid system in terms of helping people. I will say that what the link was that was so important when they found the endocannabinoid system was that when we take phytocannabinoids, which is what hemp or cannabis is, it imitates our endogenous cannabinoid system, so our endocannabinoid system. So the way in which this mechanism works is sometimes called the lock and key. We have receptors, and we have cannabinoids that fit on those receptors, and then when it fits on, that messaging goes out. This is how we're going to help you get into balanced health. This is how we're going to pull you back in. And all the different signals go off about how to do that based on what's wrong with you in that particular person. And when they discovered the system, they also discovered that, in fact, by taking cannabinoids, plant cannabinoids, they mimic our endogenous cannabinoids. So that was a huge piece of information, and that's the information I think a lot of times that healthcare providers who haven't been exposed to the endocannabinoid system, when they say, how could it possibly help that many things? There's no way, because of course there's nothing else that exists like it. That's the reason, is because the system is actually mimicking the one that we already have, that when we're in good health is operating correctly. And when we're in not so good health, taking cannabinoids can often be of great assist in that. So some of the specifics involve, so it has the cannabis plant has over 100 phytocannabinoids, plant-based cannabinoids. We only know about a few of them being therapeutic. So we don't know, advances are happening every single year. This is an incredibly dynamic system and science. And so we're only finding out about a few every year that have a connection to therapeutics. A lot of information and research has been based on THC and CBD, but we know that there's other ones that show up in our research and in our products, in dispensary products, and some of those are THCA, CBDA, CBN, CBG. These are not household words yet, but these are ones that when you go to many dispensaries in the state, they will have products that have these in them, and they have certain effects on people. For instance, CBN is one that a lot of times people talk about THC being good for sleep, and it can be, but CBN is actually the leader in sleep. And so for people who deal with insomnia, which is like 90% of us, maybe more, if you're a middle-aged woman, it's definitely it's one of our superpowers to exist without sleep. And so CBN is one of the ones that people potentially would take to help them with sleep. CBD is really, really popular right now. Has anybody heard of CBD in the room? Is anybody taking CBD in the room? All right. So CBD is super popular because, amongst other things, you don't need a medical marijuana card. It doesn't make you euphoric. Some people consider that a negative. Some people don't, but it doesn't make you euphoric. When we're talking about dealing with people who are very ill or the elderly, that sense of euphoria is dyseuphoric. And so people don't want to be exposed to that. And there's ways, and I'll talk about it, where you can have THC in your products and not feel high. Some of the things that it's very interesting about CBD is it actually sort of fits on part of the same receptor that THC can, and what it winds up doing is it tamps down that euphoria. So for folks who've had any exposure to the literature or dispensaries will know that there's a lot of what we call one-to-one products. So products that have THC and CBD in them. And there's a reason for that, which is that the CBD can potentiate the healing effects of the THC at the same time that it takes away what some people would consider negative which is the euphoria, and some aspects of what we call couch lock might not be there, that kind of thing. So a lot of people like those products because they can then function in life. They can actually, it will take away their pain, but it won't make them groggy or sleepy or feel high, which, if you don't want to feel that way, you don't want to feel that way. The other thing a little bit I just want to mention is the Entourage Effect of products that, generally speaking, come with cannabis, but also is in the literature about hemp. And that's that we really don't totally know all of the science yet, even about the ones we've studied a lot about. And we believe that there's something called the Entourage Effect, which is that it's not just the cannabinoid itself that's giving us health relief, but it's actually a bunch of things all at once. And there's lots of debates in the field about what type of product you should take if you're seeking relief. And some people refer to this as whole plant, that you don't want to distillate, that you want parts of the whole plant in your medicine. And that's because all these other things might have therapeutic properties. We know that terpenes have therapeutic properties, the things that make a plant smell and sometimes taste, depending upon the plant. But there's amino acids, there's proteins, there's sugars, enzymes, all these other things that some of the science believes when it all comes together, sort of like a really good tomato sauce, you don't want to just have tomatoes. Sometimes you want onions, sometimes you want garlic, all these things.
Also placebo?
Also placebo?
No, I said, is some of that also possibly placebo effect? Like,
I don't know. I'm trying it on just to figure out, I think,
well, because it's cool, it's hip, and it's new.
I think it's an interesting thing to conceive of. I think part of, so many of the people that, first of all, and we're going to get to it, but the people who can get a card have to be very sick.
Oh, I meant on the CBD.
Oh, on the CBD. It could be. It could be. I know that CBD is a little complicated. I have another slide on it. It's a little complex versus the THC, you kind of know when you have an effect. And actually, there's a lot of titration issues around, we tell people to go low, start low and go slow, because what you want to do is almost start at a sub-therapeutic level and build up to where you're feeling like not high, but no pain. But you can gauge that because THC lets you know when it's in your system, whereas CBD doesn't. You're either going to have symptom relief or you're not. And placebo effect, it exists, it's real. There's been a lot of research around, there's a certain percentage that they say is in every study is, I think it's like 10% or,
Yeah.
it's scientifically significant.
Still an effect.
Yeah.
If people are feeling like they're getting some relief,
Then so be it.
better than,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's a good thing, it's still in effect. So a little more information about CBD, and I'm sorry if you guys can't see that really. We're just really going to look at those first two columns. So the first column's THC, and as you can see, there's just there's 4 therapeutic effects, and then the next column is CBD, and as you can see, there's a lot more than 4 effects. But what I often like to tell people is it doesn't make CBD better. When you need THC, you need THC. CBD is very good for chronic pain, but it's not good at all for severe pain. And when you're dealing with some of these in the state of Vermont, and we're going to get to the qualifying conditions, some of them involve severe pain. And you want a product that can help you with that. I think that there's a lot of things, CBD, obviously we talked about no medical card. It can be financially accessible, more so sometimes than the THC products. One of the things that comes up a lot of times in the talks is, how do I know what to buy? There's so many products out there now. And I have to say, we live in the great state of Vermont where everybody's a farmer. And everybody's grown a little bit of CBD. Everybody's grown a little bit of hemp. And so people at talks have said to me, how do I know what to buy, who to trust? And it's difficult. It's really difficult. And in the fall, the Journal of the American Medical Association released a report. They took a bunch of products from all over the country, I think, and they tested them, and some horribly high percentage of them came back with no CBD in the product at all. So you have to kind of, you have to sort of do your research. I will say some companies that I'll mention to you are ones that are both local, and then I have some nationals that we know are very good, and they test their products, and they have a great reputation. One is Mary's of the samples I gave out. Another one is Charlotte's Web, CW. There's another company that actually makes Charlotte's Web that is producing under a different name, but it's the same company, called the Stanley Brothers. Locally, there is Upstate Elevator is a good company. Green Mountain CBD, right in Hardwick, is a very good company. And they try to make, they make capsules and salves, and they try to make their products really affordable. And they are in that stream of CBD. Aromed, which is right in Montpelier, is very good. She makes roll-on oils. She's a nurse and does a lot of work with terpenes. I'm trying to think of a couple of others upstate. Loose Farm. Elmore Mountain. Elmore Mountain does a very good job. So if you're looking for, that's a nice grouping to give you. If you're looking for a type of product to use, you'll probably find it amongst that grouping. And there's in the CBD world, there's everything from capsules, salves, patches. You can smoke hemp. There's smoking. There's vaping from the oil. That's a very attractive one for people who have chronic pain and have breakthrough pain, because vaping doesn't have the same level of harm as smoking, and also it's quick acting. And so that's why you see people really interested in using vape pens if they have pain issues. And like I mentioned before, CBD and THC can have a synergistic effect where they're actually helping each other's therapeutic qualities. I'm going to stop for a second and see if folks have any questions about what's come before I go into the specifics of the program. Nope. Okay. So that was just a general overview of the science and then some of the cannabinoids. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the medical marijuana program. So again, one of our restrictions based on Schedule 1 is that we can't advertise. So once you find us, and us I mean the Vermont Medical Marijuana Registry, you would generally go to the web and find it under our state government. It's a state program. And therein lies most of the information you will need to be able to be a patient. And so many people go there, they look and see, do I have a qualifying condition? In our state, you have to have a qualifying condition in order to apply. That's not true of every state. And for instance, the District of Columbia, what they do is they have at your doctor's recommendation. So if you have a doctor who says, oh yeah, I think, scoliosis, I think you can be helped by cannabinoids, they would sign a verification form and you can get medical marijuana. In our state, they have specific conditions, and then they sort of have broader condition windows, which we'll go over. So, but you would see if you fall under any of the qualifying conditions. You would download and print out an application. There is also a healthcare professional verification form, and every patient has to get that filled out. So those are the two that every patient needs. The third one is the Caregiver Application, and that would depend on who you are and if you want to have a caregiver. Generally speaking, you pick the caregiver, but you have to have an application for that. And then the fourth one is the Mental Health Care Provider form, and that's if you are applying for the program under PTSD. So under PTSD, you would have to have the first form, which is the healthcare provider form, so that's generally speaking your provider, your primary care provider, although not exclusively, but, and then as well, and I'll give that definition in a bit, a mental health care provider who's going to sign the second form. You'd fill out all of those, you'd take that one form to your PCP or another verifying healthcare provider and get them signed and send them into the state. The other requirements are that you have to be a Vermont resident, and you have to validate that by having a driver's license or a Vermont non-driver ID. And I think Kristen heard me say this once before, but I feel so stupid. I didn't realize that we couldn't have driver's licenses in different states. I just always assumed, like, okay, we have snowbirds here, or people own property in. I'm sorry?
You have to have one for each state.
No, I think your primary license has to be picked, you have to pick one state for your license. Yeah. I was sort of shocked. So you have to be from Vermont and say you're from Vermont and have those forms of ID. The application fee is $50 and it's non-refundable. You also have to submit a digital color photo, which you can do by a smartphone. And some people do it by disc, I've heard, but that's, I think, more complicated unless you have that. And you send all of those things into the state, and then generally speaking, the state has 30 days to verify all of that information and send it back to you. And they tend to do it in much fewer days than 30. And if someone's very, very ill, their application can be expedited, and we've participated in that, where people have gotten their cards within like 2 days. Yeah.
So once you get the card and that, what if you lose the card? What is the process to get it back? I mean, you have to start again. Process again.
There's a replacement fee. If you're on the rolls as being somebody who has a current card, and so you haven't expired and your card is current, you have to fill out a form and send in a little bit more money to get it replaced. You don't have to start your process all over again. But the card is only good for a year. And then you have to start all over again. Same fees, same process. You have to do a renewal. And
$50 non-refundable fee.
right.
You gotta get your information from your doctor again and all that.
Yeah, a renewal is slightly different. So if you have the same medical provider,
Right.
they would just sign the renewal. You don't have to do like a waiting period, which we'll go over in a second. But so yeah.
Is that paperwork sent out to you, or you have to go back on the website?
That's where you go to the website.
For each time, for your renewal, each year you have to do that. What if someone doesn't have access to a computer?
It's a bummer. I mean, seriously, one of the big issues about the program is access. No, access because of the fees, access because of the computer-based issues of it. Generally speaking, when we have a customer service desk, and generally speaking, what we tell folks is they can go to their library. We have at our Cirrus stores, so we have a dispensary and then we have sister stores for CBD, and we have free copies of the applications in our Cirrus stores.
Okay, when I talked to my doctor, he left me for about 15 minutes, and he came back with a thing all signed
And printed,
and
yeah.
printed out what he wanted.
Yeah.
So you can just go to your doctor and he'll give it to you.
Yeah, if you have a nice doctor, that's right. Yep. No, but that's a great, and a lot of, and Kristen and I know this from a lot of cancer centers will print it out for you. There's a lot of places that will be will help you with the process. Some won't, but many will.
So before you leave, you take a couple from the back.
I have them in the back. Yep.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
Have them on hand.
Yeah, I've
It's
started.
good to have a couple extras at home.
Yeah, no, I've started. I never used Kristen and from last time I had said, I used to just do these and bring information, generally speaking, and talk about it. But then I realized at the one that I did in Berlin, there were 30 people and they were part of the same organization and only one person had a card. And none of them had the application with them. And so now every time I go out to speak, I bring a bunch of applications. So it's one step less that they have to do. So here's our debilitating medical condition eligibility. Cancer, MS, HIV, AIDS, glaucoma, Crohn's, Parkinson's, or the treatment of these conditions. If the disease or the treatment results in severe, persistent, or intractable symptoms, and I often think, obviously, of cancer and chemo, and or PTSD, and that's provided that the applicant is undergoing psychotherapy or counseling with a licensed mental health care provider, and I'll give those definitions in a minute. And then this very broad window at the bottom, which is a disease or medical condition or its treatment that is chronic, debilitating, and produces one or more of the following intractable symptoms: wasting syndrome, chronic pain, which is a big one, severe nausea or seizures. Now, some states take a very opposite approach to this, and they'll have like 50 conditions listed. And, one can say that that's a better way to go, potentially. I think Vermont, which I find to be really a thoughtful state, what they're trying to do is give the patient and their healthcare provider as much leeway as they can, given what we know about the research. And, every year we lobby, our organization is part of a group that lobbies the legislature about how they can make it more accessible for patients. I think one of the big ones that I would personally like to see on the list is insomnia, because I don't know anybody at a certain point in life that doesn't suffer from insomnia, based on everything from, maybe you have a condition that's horrible, but it's not a qualifying condition, or you're just living today and you can't sleep. Yeah.
How did they come up with that list?
It slowly over time. It didn't get birthed this way.
So you think they'll be adding to that as time goes by?
Every year they try to add to it. This year they did not add a condition, partially because they added legalization. So the year before they added PTSD and I think one or two others. But yeah, generally speaking, they add one or two a year if they feel comfortable with what's being brought to them. And again, this is something we all need to remember about the mechanisms of policy and politics that we work with, is if they don't hear from us, they don't change. And so if people are really interested in adding to the list and adding to awareness about how this can be medicine that people can use, it makes sense. And sometimes all it takes is one constituent saying, hey, did you know that this was really effective for insomnia or anxiety, which a lot of people use it for anxiety, or migraines, which a lot of people use it for migraines. And it's just easier. I mean, I think there's chronic pain there, and I know lots of medical providers who sign for migraines, but it could also really help to just see it, because then there's no debate. All right, it's right there. Let's get it signed. You've had migraine.
It does seem like that third thing at the bottom, a nice.
Yep, it's a nice
leeway.
catch-all. That's right. And people use it all the time. They use it all the time. So definitions: who are our healthcare professionals? It's an MD or DO, naturopathic physician, advanced practice registered nurse, PA, or those professionally licensed on our border states, because so many of our Vermonters get their medical help over the borders. And then for purposes of PTSD, that last thing got chopped off. Sorry about that. Is psychiatrist, psychologist, doctorate or master, clinical social worker, or clinical mental health care provider. And you have to be in a bona fide healthcare professional relationship, which is, it has to be of 3 months standing. So many people do have a PCP and many people don't. So really, and sometimes your PCP retires, sometimes they die, sometimes they move away, sometimes they retire. There's a whole, slew of reasons why you don't have that 3-month relationship. There are exceptions to that: terminal illness, cancer, AIDS, hospice care, or sudden onset are the primary ones. Yeah.
So I just had a patient today, actually, in which he did fit that criteria because he just got diagnosed with stage 4. That's everywhere, the beginning of the month.
Right.
So that's when he saw his oncologist. And he had no PCP before that.
Right.
So would he be able to,
So the oncologist should be able to sign immediately.
except he hasn't seen it for at least 3 months.
So these are these exceptions. So this is the exceptions, is that category. Exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah. They should be able to sign, no questions asked in that category. Cool. Any other questions or comments? So registered caregivers, we're very lucky in the state of Vermont. Not all states have registered caregiver programs, and some of them look different. But we have one, and it's really wonderful if you're very, very ill. So a registered caregiver can purchase product for the patient. They can cultivate, grow for the patient, because now, of course, we can do both. They are subject to a criminal background check, but patients are not. They can be a current registered patient themselves. They must be 21 years of age or older. They must be a Vermont state resident. They can only assist one patient at a time. Some states allow you to do many, many more. And there is a non-refundable $50 application fee for a caregiver. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Can't escape the fees.
Say one quick thing about the provider certification.
Please.
So your doctor, when they're filling out your forms and signing it, they're not saying that they think that medical marijuana is the right thing for your treatment. They're certifying that you've been a patient of theirs for 3 months and that you have one of the qualifying diagnoses. So that's all that they're saying. Sometimes that's part of the conversation with a provider if they're not comfortable saying is that they're not saying that they think it's definitely going to help you. They're saying that you have this and you have a relationship. That's all that they're certifying.
Mm-hmm. And still, sometimes they may not feel comfortable signing, and we see that a lot, more than we'd like.
See, my provider, as soon as I mentioned I was considering it,
Yep.
he says, I had nothing against that at all, he says, I think that will help you. And I go, fine, I'll try it.
Who's your provider? Now I'm just curious.
I can't give his name.
Oh, okay. Can
Yeah, I
you?
can, Dr. Simcoe.
Simcoe, is he from this hospital?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, primary care. Oh, awesome. We love hearing those stories. We do, because it's,
I think he's a very nice person.
yeah, everybody's smiling and saying yes. So that's great.
Oh, you all know him?
No, we didn't show, of course.
Yeah, that's
My
awesome.
doctor has also said that she would give me
Mm-hmm.
whatever I needed to.
Great, great. Well, I might get her name too afterwards. It's very encouraging because it means that people are understanding the science and they're feeling like they can help people by doing this. So we think that's wonderful. Great. Any other questions? I just have a couple more slides left. So the dispensary experience. So what happens is when you send in that package, that application package, you're going to get a package back from the state. And in addition to your some of your information, they're going to also ask you to pick a dispensary. So you have to start by picking one. And you can change that. You aren't stuck with them forever. You have to pay more money if you want to change it. But you can change it, and I think they change it within like 10 days. So sometimes what happens is, which makes sense, people pick dispensaries where they live.
Right.
And what we see sometimes is that not all the dispensaries have the same exact products. And so people will talk to other patients, or they'll call other dispensaries and they'll find out that something that they're attracted to or interested in is at another dispensary. And because they all have delivery, they'll change to another dispensary. And sometimes they don't mind driving to it, and sometimes they'll just sign up for delivery. It just really depends on what they're looking for. And we see that a lot too. So once you get your card, oh yeah.
Is there a requirement on how much you actually get each time you go to a dispensary?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's coming on this slide.
Okay.
Yeah, good question though. So you get your package in the mail. It has your card. It'll tell you. It'll reaffirm the dispensary that you picked, and you will contact then that dispensary. So now you have your card. It's all computerized, so we all know. The state knows. We know. Everybody knows. And you set up what we in our dispensary system is called an initial. Those are long appointments. We leave 45 minutes to an hour for those. And you don't have to buy anything. People sometimes do initials and then they decide they're not ready in that moment.
So there is no quantity you have to pick?
We're getting to that.
Oh.
Yeah. So you don't have to buy anything. You're restricted once you start buying, but you don't have to buy anything. And one of the reasons we do that is so that patients learn about what it is that they're purchasing, what the medicine is, if they feel comfortable, if they don't feel comfortable. Again, if we could advertise, we could get a lot of that out of the way before you show up, but we can't advertise. So the staff reviews your symptoms. They're trying to find out what you're here for, why do you need help with what issues. They represent the products, so they'll go through all the different products that you want to look at and tell you how they operate and what's in them. We often encourage people to keep a journal because a lot of times, especially when you're working with THC products, it's good to know what you feel like before and after you take the product, what you ate, what you drank, all those different kinds of things. We discuss the different methods of cannabis consumption, of which there are now many. So it used to be only flower, dried flower that you would smoke. That's becoming less and less attractive to people, and we are developing more and more different types of products for people to use. And I'll go into those in a little bit more detail. We answer patients' questions because many of our patients have never, ever had exposure to cannabis or cannabinoids. And so, and all they know is, they might know a part of a story that says that it's bad for us. They might know part of a story that their cousin from Massachusetts sent them something and it was the only thing that helped, and everything in between. And so we like to spend time with patients talking about the products. And we also discuss budgets and financial aid. So it's Schedule I. It will never be covered by insurance as long as it's Schedule I, ever. And so everything's out of pocket. We do have a financial aid program. We're required by the state to do that. And so we find out if you're eligible. And then right now, patients can both home cultivate, they can grow, and they can buy product at their designated dispensary. But they're limited to 2 ounces per 30-day cycle. So that's the limitation that's on them. It's very different in different states, very different. I mean, I think one of the states I read was sort of 10 ounces, I think. Or something. I mean, it was an outrageous, I was just like, what? And then you can cultivate 7 vegetative and 2 flowering plants, and that relates to their developmental process.
What does that cost for them? They can buy up to 2 ounces. What is the cost?
The average cost per ounce is around $300. But people tend to buy a lot less. And they mix up, what, honey?
That's what I can imagine.
Yeah, and they mix up their products. They make different decisions. about their products. So people will buy, it depends on who you are and what you're suffering from, too. And no medical advice is given. So,
Now, isn't it legal for anybody to grow a plant now anyway?
Yes.
yeah, you can, yeah. Yep. Yep. It's a different number. Kristen's saying under the legalization program, it's under home grow, it's a different number. Yep. But for the medical program, we're talking about apples and oranges because many people who don't want to smoke, don't want to grow, they are ill, and they're looking for medicine. And so for them, the home grow program will never work. They want to go into a dispensary, they want to buy something that looks like something from one of these categories, potentially. You know, so we have tinctures, we have sprays, we have lozenges, we have teas and cocos, we have lotions and salves, patches and gels. Obviously, we have capsules. I mean, people, you know, they want stuff that they can take, that they can feel comfortable with, and that they can have some information about how it might affect them. And some of the products really are, you know, patient friendly in terms of, you know, if you're a 70-year-old woman with breast cancer and you're feeling not well, and you can have your medicine as a cup of tea at night, that's to take away your pain and help you sleep. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. So, and we're constantly doing research and development on products, constantly. So that we can put together a product selection that people will feel comfortable with.
Do you test them out on people?
Nope. Well, but we do have a lab, and so we have our own in-house lab. And we generally, I mean, we know what's in the products. We know how much THC is in the products and CBD. The literature will tell you this is a patient experience. It is individualized medicine. There's no doubt about it. But we know some things, and we know that some combinations of the cannabinoids generally help with, for instance, sleep or pain. We know that if people start subtherapeutically, especially on the THC side, with we're now entering a time period where providers and researchers are telling folks to start microdosing at 2.5 milligrams. Were you in any of those lectures, Kristen? Yeah. So that's a small amount, and sometimes that's a subtherapeutic amount. And so the research is showing that people tend to need that small amount, as they're building up what we call the cannabinoid tone in their bodies, and also because we want them to start subtherapeutically. We want them to know when they're going to have an effect, as opposed to get knocked over by an effect that's too big and too bad for them, and then they don't go back to it, or it takes them a really long time to go back to it because they had a bad experience. And we're also finding from a lot of the research that the subtherapeutic stuff is effective, that we're seeing people take 2.5 milligrams, sometimes with a one-to-one product, so 2.5 and 2.5 of CBD THC, and they're taking that throughout the day or night, and their symptoms are having relief, as opposed to like a big dose at night, and then it potentially doesn't help them through the next day.
When I was doing CBD, the oil, I was taking 25 milligrams twice a day. This is what I was told to take. At first, she said 2 drops, so I was only using an eyedropper with 2 drops under my tongue. And she goes, no, she said, you take two of the eyedroppers full each time. Like, what?
Did it help you? Did you notice anything?
It helped, like I said, it helped me with my arthritis in my fingers and stuff like that. But for the pain that I had, the severe pains that I have with gout and neuropathy and whatever else, the nerves, it didn't seem to touch it.
Right. So again, like everybody's everybody's different. Every individual has to
Right.
play with this stuff. I would say for neuropathy and some of the other extremity pain, I'm just sharing anecdotal information because that's sort of what this is about on some level. A lot of people get relief from both taking it, so take whatever regimen you've set up, and then also using topicals. People have had a lot of the muscle freeze? Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people have had really good, ooh, I have another product to share with you. So I'm going to wrap up in a couple minutes for questions and answers, but I have another product with me. I just have like a couple of samples that could be really good for you. It's brand new to us. And so it's a very strong anti-inflammatory. It's
Here,
called
use it tonight, 'cause every night,
Every Night.
I'm up anywhere between, I either don't go to bed till 3 in the morning.
Because of your
or
pain?
I go to bed at 11 and I'm up at 2 and don't get back to bed until 8 the next morning.
Okay.
Because I'm in pain all the time.
Sure, of course, yeah. So I have something I want you to try.
Okay.
And then the other thing I was going to say just generally about some of the products that we're seeing, for instance, and this is just people share with us, what they're experiencing. There's a woman I've known for years and years and years who told me recently that she has Restless Leg Syndrome, which I haven't had experience with personally, nor have I had anyone that I knew with that. And I just was ignorant. I didn't know that pain goes along with it. I thought it was just movement, but she said it can be movement and pain, and so she doesn't sleep all night. And someone gave her, somebody local, like Upstate Elevator or something like that, a product, and she said it worked from the very first night she took it. She slept. And then a different person, I was doing a panel of people with Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, and it's a connective tissue issue, and there can be lots of pain, like fibromyalgia pain. And that woman said, I was so impressed with her. That woman said she kept taking her CBD, and it was Charlotte's Web, which is a very good quality oil. She kept taking it sublingually. She took it for 2 months before she noticed anything. And I was like, wow, 2 months that's a commitment. Because most of us, especially Americans, we're like, want to see it immediate. And she kept taking it, although it's not a good disease to have, obviously. And so she was really committed. And after 2 months, she said, almost all of her symptoms went away. So that gets to this endocannabinoid tone thing of building up. It does bioaccumulate. And for some people, you need to get to a certain level of it, apparently, in your system before you'll start to feel some symptom relief because your body's being pulled back into health. And there's a lot of stuff on the web about testimonials, patient testimonials. But it is individualized medicine. There's no two ways about that. Everybody's so different.
Is there a max amount for CBD that you've heard of?
That's a wonderful question because the World Health Organization just put out, it's not in this slideshow, it's in another one that I have, they just put out an announcement that they could find no amount at which CBD had any negative effect on anyone. And they went as high as 700 milligrams. That's a lot, yeah. So yeah, we do know that it's, the one area of potential negativity, and I might defer to Kristen on this as a healthcare provider, is there are these endogenous enzymes that we produce that are part of who we are that help us metabolize pharmaceuticals. And there's information evidence that CBD can interfere with some of those enzymes. And healthcare providers that I've heard talk about it say, generally speaking, it's not an issue. You'll have to take less of something. But there are those instances where the pharmaceuticals that you are taking, you don't want to mess with those levels inside of you. So there's some of the more important ones like statins and blood thinners. Is that?
It is, yeah. The there's a mechanism in your system called CYP450, and it's what makes your body get rid of things or hang on to things. And so when you take a medicine and you want it to go in and out of your system, you take a certain dose. And if there are some medications or some things, like sometimes grapefruit juice, there's some medicines you can't take grapefruit juice with. That's one of the, because it affects that CYP450, causes your body to hang on to that medicine longer than you're supposed to, which means the level can go up higher than
They
it
say
should
can kill you if you.
in your bloodstream. It can definitely, depending on what
Like
medication it is,
grapefruit
that
juice.
could affect it. So that's that. It's the how fast your body metabolizes things that it potentially can affect. Although there's not a lot of decisions about how much it can affect it or which medications might be affected by it, but that's the one thing that's impossible.
Right. So it's a gray area. I will say this, if medical marijuana killed somebody through this mechanism, we would all really know about it. I should say CBD. We would all really know about it because it's so vilified. But it is something
Well,
to be.
same as grapefruit juice, I've never heard anybody dropping dead from that.
That's correct, yeah. It's not Schedule 1, though. But it is something.
About it. Just think it's an odd one that I can't have.
Right. I will say it's worth, it is worth mentioning. We often say to people, if you think that you're going to be a long-term user, it is worth mentioning to your healthcare provider so that everybody knows. It's just like any other, like a supplement now, we all have to say what supplements we're taking. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. And what I've said to people is we want more and more of our healthcare providers to know about cannabinoids. We don't want to keep them separate. We want them to know so that they get educated because, quite frankly, this is a very safe medicine to use, incredibly safe. You cannot die of an overdose of cannabis.
Nobody ever has.
Nobody ever has. 5,000 years of written history, nobody has.
Okay, I've been taking gabapentin now for, I'm gonna say well over a year. And they're telling me that I have to get weaned off it. But by going on cannabis, can I just get off it? I don't understand where they tell me I gotta get weaned off something when any other time in my life I wanted to stop something, I just stopped it.
Right. I mean, when somebody, if your healthcare provider is saying to you it's a good idea to wean yourself off of it, I would listen to that because I think.
But if this is working.
Right, but you still want to.
And the other one's not.
But you still want to, you don't want to shock your body. You really don't want to, generally speaking, we want to be good to our bodies. And sometimes when we go cold turkey on things like medications, it's not a good idea. It really isn't.
Right.
It's like, you want your body to adjust to the changes that are going on. And you also want to know what's going on with it. So sometimes if you go cold turkey, something bad might happen.
Right.
And you
See,
really.
I started at 800 milligrams. Now I'm up to 2,400. Like, I don't want to go any higher on this because to me it doesn't seem like it's doing anything.
And they're telling you that
But
they want.
they're saying you get off it and you'll see that it is doing something.
Is that the theory? Is that the theory that they want?
That you don't realize how much it's working until you're not taking it.
Even though I'm still in pain. Because it doesn't seem like it's doing what it's supposed to do.
And nerve pain's hard.
Nerve pain is
It's
hard.
hard.
Lots of anecdotal stuff with CBD, though. I will say that, truly. There's a lot of stuff on CBD. There's a lot of stuff of cannabinoids on neuropathy.
Well, I mean, I was only doing 25 milligrams twice a day on CBD. I mean, maybe,
And you noticed a
and I
difference.
only did that one bottle was at 2 ounces.
Yeah.
It's a 2-ounce bottle. And then I said, well, it helped a little bit with my arthritis, but it didn't do zits for
Right,
my arch and my ankle and stuff like that.
right. You're going to move to the topical for those.
Yeah, I get the stabbing pains.
Yeah,
I mean, I got nights I want to just cut that foot right off. That's how bad it is.
that's how bad it is. Yeah. Well,
And
we're
my
going to.
wife's going, honey, there's got to be something. Yeah, I said, I'm going to this class.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh, I went to oh, what's that one? Stem cells.
Uh-huh.
I went to a conference at La Quinta, probably a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. And I was interested, but it's like this, your insurance doesn't cover it.
Right,
And they're talking $5,000 for 2 units
right.
of stem cells.
Yeah, that's a chunk of
And
change.
my wife says, what do you think, we're rich? And I'm going, oh, okay. So I just blew that away.
Well, let me get you this little, it's a little sampler packet too. So that's it.